They walked up 88th Street, past a group of five-story brownstones, and quickly reached their old apartment building at number 448. It had recently been painted a gray-blue in place of the dirty yellow she remembered. "We can't get in," Sabrina said as they climbed the freshly salted steps. "The police took our keys when they sent us to the orphanage." "Sabrina, those old keys wouldn't work anyway," her grandmother said. "There's a new family living here, and I'm sure they've changed the locks." Sabrina stifled a cry. She had never imagined the strangers might actually be living in their home. "So someone else lives here?" Daphne whispered. Sabrina could hear her own dismay echoed in her sister's voice. Granny nodded as she pushed on the buzzer that rang their old apartment. "Hello, who is it?" a voice crackled from the speaker. Yes, so sorry to bother you, ma'am, but my name is Rhoda Grimm. I'm here with my granddaughters who used to live in your apartment." Suddenly, a buzzer sounded and the door unlocked. The group stepped out inside the building and walked down the hall to the girls' old apartment. Halfway there, they were greeted by an excited woman with huge red glasses. "I'm so thrilled to meet you," she said. "I hope you're not imposing," Granny Rhoda said. "We were in the neighborhood." "Nonsense, I've always wanted to meet the previous owners," the woman said, holding out her hand. "My name is Gloria Frank. I'm Rhoda Grimm. These are my granddaughters Sabrina and Daphne and Marv." "Hello, peasant," Marv said, awkwardly hoisting Puck's cocoon onto her shoulder. Gloria Frank looked confused but smiled. "Please come in," she said, ushering them down the hall and into the apartment. For Sabrina, stepping into the living room was a shock. Their once colorful home was now painted in drab shades of wheat. The hardwood floors had been redone, stealing all their old charm and personality, and many of the antique light fixtures had been replaced with austere modern lamps. All of the furniture Sabrina remembered was gone. The big, puffy couch had been replaced with a sleek, chocolate-brown sofa that looked more like a work of art than something to sit on. Every photograph of her family was gone. Even Daphne's finger paintings were no longer hanging on the refrigerator. Just then, a teenage boy walked out of one of the bedrooms. He was a lanky kid wearing a rugby shirt and carrying a handheld video game. He had curly blonde hair and a pair of headphones in his ears. When he saw the visitors, he took off the headphones and regarded the group curiously. "Mom, what is that awful smell?" "His Majesty's healing vessel gives off an unusual scent, but is not by any means awful," Marv said. "You should be honored to have found its aroma in your nose, you undeserving wretch." "I'm so sorry," Granny said, stepping between Marv and everyone else. "My granddaughter's in a play, and she's been practicing her lines non-stop. Unfortunately, they're using some unusual props, and she feels it's best to carry one with her." "She's a method actress. How delightful. My son is an actor, too," Mrs. Frank said as she turned to her son. "What was the last play your school did? You were incredible in it. What was it called?" "A Midsummer Night's Dream." He played Puck. Do you girls know that play? We're living it, Sabrina murmured as the cocoon gave off a particularly noxious blast of gas. "Phil, these girls used to live here," Mrs. Frank said, waving her hand in front of her nose, and then seeming to realize that this might be rude, pretended to smooth her hair instead. "What's up?" the boy said. "You have my old bedroom," Daphne said quietly. Phil raised his eyes and nodded, then put his headphones back on and wandered out of the room. "I'm sorry. Since we bought him that game, we can't get it away from him," his mother said. "Can I take your coats?" "We can't stay," Granny said. "We just wanted to come by and see who lived here now." "Oh, we really love the apartment. I hope you think we're taking good care of it," Mrs. Frank said. Sabrina didn't answer. She kept glancing around the room, trying to find something she recognized. The whole experience was making her dizzy. Mrs. Frank, there's one other thing. We're wondering if you happen to find anything in the apartment when you moved in. Say, for instance, a journal or a book of stories about fairy tale characters, Granny said. The girl's mother may have kept one, and we'd love to get our hands on it. We found a few things when we redid the kitchen and the closets, the woman said. She rushed out of the room and returned with an old shoebox. My husband told me I was crazy to keep this stuff. He says I'm a pack rat, but it seemed personal and, well, it felt wrong to throw them out. Sabrina took the box and flipped open the lid. Inside were a few yellowy love letters their father had written their mother, some scattered pictures of Sabrina and Daphne in the bathtub when they were little, and a lady's wallet with pink roses sewed on the front. No journal, Daphne said with a sigh. Oh dear, it's not here, their grandmother said. Do you think you might have overlooked it? She said to Mrs. Frank. Gloria Frank shook her head. We did a lot of work on this place when we moved in. If there were a journal, we would have found it. I'm sorry. Well, we appreciate you hanging on to these things, Granny said. We should probably be going. It was so nice to meet you, Mrs. Frank said. Don't worry, we'll take good care of this place. Granny and the girls waited at the bus stop until the next bus came. They climbed inside and found a seat in the back. Muff chattered on about how ignorant human beings could be, but the grim woman was silent. Sabrina sat by the window, watching her neighborhood disappear. Back at the hotel, the little group waited for the elevator. When the doors opened, they were startled to see Mr. Hamster and Bess inside, locked in a passionate kiss. When the couple finally noticed everyone staring, Hamster's face went pink and his snout popped out. He quickly put his hand over it, eyeing Bess nervously as if he didn't want her to see. Bess, on the other hand, was grinning from ear to ear and holding him in her arms like they were lost at sea and he was a life preserver. Hello? Granny said as the couple stepped out of the elevator. Is Mr. Canis awake? Yes, Hamster said, his face still pink. He's in his room and wants to speak to you, and wants to speak with you. I asked him if everything was okay, and he nearly bit my head off. Literally. He blushed even more brightly when he noticed that Daphne was giving him playful winks. We just stopped by for some hot cocoa, Bess said. Wall Street was a bust. It's incredible how fractured our community is. We live such separate, secret lives. We're going to try Soho and Chinatown next. The blonde lady turned to Hamster and gave him a big, over-the-top smooch on the cheek. Sugar dumpling, I'm going to freshen up. Mind if I borrow your room key? Not at all, Hamster said. He dug into his pocket and handed the key to her. A moment later, she was back inside the elevator and on her way upstairs. Mr. Hampstead, I do believe you're smitten with her, Granny said. What does smitten mean? Daphne asked. Sabrina turned to answer, but noticed something unusual. The little girl was asking Granny Rhoda instead of her. It means he's got a huge crush on her, Granny said. Which is a huge problem, Mr. Hampstead said. When she finds out who I am, what I am. Oh no, she's an ever after too, obviously, Granny Rhoda said. A human ever after, Hampstead said. I'm a pig. There's a big difference. But there are lots of mixed ever after couples. You're forgetting Miss Muff and the spider. Miss Muff is a crackpot, Hampstead said. Bess is beautiful and funny and the most amazing woman I've ever met. She's not going to be interested in me when she discovers I'm just an unemployed pig from upstate. Granny smiled. I'm sure that Bess likes you for who you are. If this pointless conversation is over, Muff complained, I'd like to get His Majesty back to the room. Of course, Granny said. I'm going to pop in on Mr. Canis. I'll meet you soon. The girls went up to the room and closed the door. Muff climbed onto one of the two queen-sized beds and propped the icky cocoon onto a pillow. I need silence, humans, she announced. Serena rolled her eyes. Fine, she said, turning her to her sister. I need to talk to you. She gestured to the bathroom and Daphne followed her inside. Daphne, Granny and I have talked and we've come to an understanding. I know all about it, Daphne said stiffly. Then you know I'm not going to be involved in this detective stuff anymore. I know you're quitting. I don't want you to do it either. We should be trying to find out how to wake Mom and Dad up. Anyway, once they're back to normal, we can move somewhere normal and be a family again. Doesn't that sound good? Suddenly, Daphne burst into tears. They streamed down her face and onto the shoebox Gloria Frank had given them, but she still clutched it in her hands. Why are you crying? Sabrina said, dismayed. Don't you want to get back to normal? No, Daphne yelled. This is our destiny. You don't even know what the word destiny means. For the first time in Sabrina's life, she saw rage in her little sister's eyes. Before Sabrina knew what had happened, Daphne set down the shoebox, opened the door to the shower, turned on the water, and shoved Sabrina inside. You little... Sabrina sputtered. I'm trying to protect us. No, you're not. You're trying to protect yourself. You haven't once asked me what I want. You're a jerkazoid and I don't need you. I'll be a fairy tale detective all by myself. Daphne turned and stomped out of the room, slamming the bathroom door behind her. Soaked to the bone, Sabrina climbed out of the shower, took off her clothes, and put on one of the fancy white robes the hotel had left hanging on the back of the door. She wrapped her head in a towel and thought about what her sister had just said. Daphne was mad, but Sabrina would make her understand. She was doing this for both of them. The little girl had left the shoebox sitting on the toilet tank. Sabrina picked it up and opened the lid. The photos were the embarrassing bathtub shots that parents loved to take and kids wished would be lost in a fire. But they made Sabrina smile. They represented happier times. She flipped through the yellowing love letters tied in a small red ribbon and then opened the pink wallet. Inside was her mother's driver's license, some expired credit cards, a couple of pictures of her father, and a photo of Veronica sitting with her daughters. Sabrina and Daphne had their faces painted with stars and rainbows and were smiling. Sabrina remembered that day clearly. Her mother had taken them to a fair held at the South Street seaport. It had been a good day. It was odd to hold something that her mother had owned. The girls didn't have a single item from their old lives. Even their clothes were gone. Sabrina lifted the wallet to her nose and sniffed deeply, hoping to find some hint of her mother's perfume, but all she could smell was old leather. Chapter 5. With her sister not talking to her and Mom shooting her angry looks, Sabrina turned to the book her grandmother had given her when they had arrived in the city. A Midsummer Night's Dream was a play starring Puck and his obnoxious parents, Cobweb and Moth were in it as well. Though the old-fashioned writing was challenging, it didn't take a brain surgeon to realize that Shakespeare had his hands full with Oberon and Titania. He described them both as petty, jealous, and manipulative. Apparently, Sabrina realized nothing had changed in the 400-plus years since the play had been written. When Granny returned to the room, Mr. Kenneth was with her. Except for a glimpse that morning, Sabrina hadn't seen him since the night before. She was shocked at his appearance. He had grown several inches in height and packed on 20 pounds of muscle. His shock of white hair now had brown streaks in it, and he had what looked like the definite beginnings of a beard and a mustache. Sabrina knew what was happening to the old man. Lately, whenever he tapped into the big bad wolf's power, he lost a little more of himself. She wondered what the family would do when there was no more of Mr. Kenneth to lose, but she said nothing. That seems to be the end of this video. I'll send more later.